Cush Sovereignty, Black Righteousness by L. James Bolin. Chapter 3 Part 2, Betrayal and Obedience. Samuel continued, indentured servants were slaves as it has always been since the 1600, and let's not forget what happened to Libya after the murder of Muammar al-Gaddafi.
Slavery applies to any person bought and sold, chained, and abused, whether for a year, a decade, or a lifetime. Over the years, many Wakatilians died long before their indenture service ended. Those who made it were denied their freedom.
Do you think the justice system would have helped them? There was no justice system, no court of law. Who would back them when their owners failed to deliver on their promises? The Abenians? I don't think so. Millions of so-called convicts, beggars, homeless, and other undesirable Wakatilians were transported to the Americas against their will on slave ships.
Those who volunteered did so only because they knew their future in Ireland would be more poverty, disease, and oppression from the Computans and the Abenians. They were stuck on an island with nowhere to go. America became their dream.
These ships were a repeat of the trans-American slave trade.
They were so crowded and in terrible conditions that many died on their way to the Americas. Even as the ships were docking, they soon learned that living in America would be a battle for survival. Thousands of runners, usually large groups of greedy men, swarmed aboard the ship before they could dock, grabbing them and forcing them to tenement houses. They then would charge an outrageous fee for their services. Some of them had to settle in the ports they arrived in, begging on every street corner. Samuel paused as he finished his lemonade, but I must say, unlike the Wakatilians of the Congo, who were treated as animals.
I mean, they weren't even considered men.
Samuel paused again with a strange look and then shook his head. Well, those of Ireland were unfamiliar with plumbing and running water, let alone technology.
These living conditions bred sickness and premature death.
They estimated that 75% of all infants born to the Irish Wakatilians immigrants died. They were ridiculed for how they dressed, for being poor and illiterate. Instead of apologizing for themselves, they soon united and took offense.
They often met insult or intimidation with violence.
Solidarity was their strength. They helped one another survive this life. They prayed and drank together. The men seemed to do more drinking than praying, yet their faith and determination led them to create the Sabaoth First Temple of the Americas. It was a militant church, a church that fought not only for their souls but also for their human rights. During this time, one of the greatest Wakatilians came on the scene, a Buksagan, which means wildcat, from the clan of Tablita, the son of Wanyenyekevu and Queen Anaya, your grandfather. The man from the other side of nowhere, some called him.
Cush looked at Samuel, the other side of nowhere?
Samuel just smiled. I will get into that later, just know he was a young man around your age when he arrived. But he grew into a man of significant influence who became the reasoning force among all Wakatilians in those parts.
They united and destroyed one of the evilest demons there is, Batet. He understood that the Computans and the Abenians were the enemies.
They were trying to force our people to destroy one another because of geographical locations, faith, skin tones, and other idiotic reasons. A Buksagan wanted all Wakatilians and the Anakitas united as one. He even saved a few Computans.
A Buksagan was our ancestor who was born in Arizona. He knew firsthand about the separation and destruction of Wakatilians because his father taught him his history. Being the son of Queen Anaya, who was half Computans and half Wakatilians. They nicknamed them half-breed or mestizos, and that's how that name came to be. The mestizos were a unified force that was an exceptional group of people who were well trained in the art of war created by Sabaoth himself, called Poing de Dieu or Hands of God, but he was also well trained in the art of peace. By this time, many mestizos were Anakitas, Wakatilians, and even Computans mixtures and were very well respected and feared in the West. The mestizos were created when Queen Chi's father, Shaka, was visited by a servant of Sabaoth a few years before her death named Mletsi. Cush interrupted Samuel. Dan Dottie?
Before he could have finished, Samuel said, yes, the same one.
Cush then said, how old is he?
Samuel said, when Sabaoth said, let us create man in our image, it was Mletsi and Shika he was speaking to. Cush leaned back in his chair in awe as Samuel continued. Mletsi told Shaka to send Anaya to the Americas right before her mother's death to his brother's land. where she later married Wanyenyekevu. However, it was told to her uncle, Mal, that a renegade Abenian murdered her as they obeyed Mletsi. Shaka didn't go but sent his bravest warriors to a reservation, in the far western part of the Americas, in the old town of Tucson, Arizona. It was there she would meet Wanyenyekevu, a Wakatilian warrior, a Louisiana prince who came to Arizona seeking the power and glory of Sabaoth. Samuel looked at Cush and saw that his eyes were becoming heavy. "That's enough for today, and I've gotten off track. Anyway, go get you some rest, and we will continue tomorrow." Cush got up early and did his chores around the house hastily, rushing to get to his grandfather's house. He skipped breakfast because he knew Big Ma always prepared a feast when she cooked. He ran to his grandfather's house, less than a quarter of a mile, until he saw the front door. There was a 6-foot-high fence that ran along the pathway. He saw Gemini standing there, staring at him. Smiling and waving, "Good morning, Gemini." The horse stomped his hoofs into the ground and shook his head. Cush was excited and smiled as he got closer to his grandfather's door. Samuel's stories were so vivid and clear to Cush as if he could see the characters in real life and in real time. Knocking on the door, he was met by his little cousins Cliff, nicknamed Sweets, and Ron, whose nickname was Baby Bruh. Cliff was 5 years old and the oldest of the two brothers, but wherever you saw Cliff, you saw Ron running behind him. Cliff had the door cracked open, and a delicious aroma came rushing out. The house had Cush mouth-watering as Ron threw open the door the rest of the way, standing in the middle of the doorway, half-dressed. "What you want?" said Ron, blocking him from entering the house. "It's Cush!" shouted Cliff. "Little boy." Mama Sook, Big Ma's best friend, grabbed Ron by the hand and moved him out of the way. "Good morning, Mama Sook," Cush said. Mama Sook smiled, "Morning, child." A loud voice came out of the kitchen, "Sweets. What I done told you about opening that there door. Sook, bring that boy here. I'm so tired of telling that boy the same thing." Hearing Big Ma's voice in a stern voice. "Who's at that door this time of the morning?" Cush shouts, "Morning, Big Ma, it's me." "Oh, hi Cush, get Baby Bruh, and you and Sweets come on in and wash up cause breakfast will be ready in about 10 minutes. Samuel was at the table drinking coffee and listening to recordings. He paused the recording. "Good morning, Cush," Samuel said. "Morning, Dandaddy," Cush replied. "Sit down and drink a cup of coffee with me." Big Ma overheard the conversation. "Samuel, don't you give that boy no coffee, he'll be running around here like a chicken with its head cut off." Samuel laughed, "Hush ya fuss, I ain't gonna give that boy no coffee." As he secretly poured a little coffee in his saucer and passed it to Cush, "A little coffee ain't never hurt nobody," Samuel smiled at Cush as he called out, "Baby Bruh, come here." Ron came running in. Samuel took a long drag from his favorite King Edward's cigar, resting it in an ashtray and blowing the smoke into Ron's hair. "Your hair is on fire, Baby Bruh, look." Showing Ron a small mirror, Ron ran out screaming and laughing. Big Ma then yelled out, "Y'all come get some teat." The entire house seemed to shake as a crowd from out of nowhere came rushing in from every direction. The youngest sat on the floor with their back against the cabinet, making a path for people to pass through. The oldest sat at the table. Samuel walked out as Big Ma handed him a plate. "Go get your plate and meet me in my study," Samuel told Cush. Samuel pulled out a stand for Cush to eat on. Cush placed his plate on the stand and said grace. Cush looked at his plate and didn't know where to start. Eggs, bacon, deer sausages, grits, homemade biscuits, and a glass of fresh squeezed orange juice. The entire house was quiet. All one could hear was the sound of spoons and forks hitting the plates and glasses being placed back on the table or floor. After they ate, Samuel gave Cush his plate, "Take these to the kitchen and hurry back." Cush rushed back and took a seat in Samuel's favorite chair as he sat on the small love seat. After breakfast, everyone had chores to do, from the youngest to the oldest. Duties included washing the dishes, cleaning the garden, feeding the animals, and washing clothes. The eldest homeschooled the youngest. "Dandaddy, I have that poem for you," Cush said nervously. Samuel looked up at Cush. "Well, go ahead, I'm waiting." Clearing his throat.
Got this strange feeling. It feels as if many folks think that God is some big old giant white man sitting on a throne. That alone is a hoax. For he is spirit and truth. You got him judging your every move. A heartless man who calls himself God that calls himself love. My God searches the heart. My God cradles his love for you. What is the true definition of love? What lie is this that you've been told? Who told you these lies? That's why many don't believe in God. No, they don't believe in him because of this lie. I got some good news for ya. That's not the truth for ya. Close your eyes. Do it right now. Close your eyes. Go back in time. When you went over to see Dan Daddy, Papa Joe, or Old Man Hamp. You know his name. You know their names. Your grandfather. God is like your grandfather. God is like Dan Daddy, Papa Joe, and Old Man Hamp. He loves you and you feel his love. It's not artificial or GMO. He'll tell you watch yourself. Be careful. He'll even tell you the truth about yourself. Unlike no one else. He'll tell you, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Or simply no. If we listen to his voice, of course. God is like your grandfather. The girls get special privileges. And treated like queens. You know what I mean. The boys get to do things that the girls can't do. And neither mother nor father has a word to say. Your grandfather is talking. And they too are listening. God is like a grandfather. You feel the love. You feel the pain from the punishments that you gain. Your grandfather is a good example. It is as plain as can be. Easy for you to see. What God's love is meant to be. 'Cause God is like your grandfather.